Hello everybody, and welcome back to another World of Warships ship review. And today we are looking at the Tier 7 Japanese destroyer, the Akatsuki. Now, the Akatsuki is basically the old Fubuki that's moved down a tier. Now, she's lost certain things like that concealment module, but, she does pack a whole lot more firepower than the old Hatsuharu. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take a look at her stats in port, sort of talk about those a little bit, talk about some modules, and also talk about captain skills. Now, do keep in mind that captain skills could potentially be changing the next little while with patch 0.6.0, so there are probably going to be some adjustments required to the build. Also, I am going to make the assumption that with most players who get to tier 7, you're probably only going to have a 10 or 12 point captain. So I'm going to probably base a build on having only that many points, which means I'm probably not going to get access to Concealment Expert. Although again, with 0.6.0, that could potentially change. Alright, let's talk about her stats. First up, survivability. The Akatsuki, fully decked out with the top tier hull module, has an HP pool that tops out at 13,100. That is a little bit on the low end. The Shiratsuyu and the Kiev are both lower, topping at 12,800, but the Mahan goes up to 14,100, and the Moss goes up to 17,500. That German destroyer does need that HP pool though. In terms of armor, the Akatsuki has, well, it's destroyer armor. If anybody shoots at you with HE, you're going to be taking penetration damage. Although, if you run into things shooting AP at you, you might want to consider going full broadside and taking some overpen damage rather than the big penetration damage if you're going bow in towards them. In terms of main guns, the Akatsuki, unlike the Hatsuharu, does have quite nice guns. Talking about the old Hatsuharu, mind you. So she's got basically 3 dual 127mm turrets. Now these guns, they reload in a reasonable speed. They're not USN guns by any stretch of the imagination. Reload time is 7.5 seconds stock. Turret traverse is painful though. 30 seconds to get it to traverse 180 degrees. So with that traverse speed, you gotta know that if you're gonna use these guns, you have to plan ahead of time to use them. It's not like a US destroyer where you're like, oh, I just want to get my guns over there. They're gonna be there in no time at all. These guns, you really have to plan. It's like you gotta pick your moments to use your guns. Maximum dispersion, 93 meters, although at times, even that number is pretty good, but at times in battle you will find that the Akatsuki does have those occasional random salvos that kind of disperse out a bit. So, on occasion, not as reliable. Max HE shell damage, 1800, is pretty darn good. It's not as good as it used to be for Japanese destroyers, but still on the high end. And of course, with that 7% fire chance, still got a pretty good chance of setting fires. Her AP shell damage of 2200, well, destroyer AP, you're not going to use it all that frequently, especially with a Japanese destroyer like this one. Although I guess if you run into something giving you broadside at closer ranges, you can pump in some damage with the armor piercing as well. All in all, the guns are quite good, but they do require planning. Where the Akatsuki really shines is Torpedoes. She's got 3 triple 610mm torpedo launchers, and these torpedoes are nice. They have good range, 10km range. Their torpedo detectability range by sea is not bad at 1.6 kilometers. They go at a reasonable speed of 62 knots, and they do nice damage, 17,233. Now, because they're triple launchers, they also reload pretty quickly, only 76 seconds to reload a launcher, so you're going to be able to get off torpedoes quite frequently with the Akatsuki. Torpedo armament is definitely her strong point. AA, yeah, okay. The Akatsuki has some AA, she's got some 25mm guns, and her main 127mm guns are dual purpose, so she's got a little bit of AA, but really you're not going to be shooting down all that many planes. Maybe a lucky one here and there, but all in all, AA is just kind of a moot thing on the Akatsuki. In terms of maneuverability, the Akatsuki is an interesting destroyer. She is speedy, going 38 knots, and that means she's faster than the Shiratsuyu, which I think only manages 34. She's faster than the Mahan. Of course, she's slower than ships like the Kiev, but for a Japanese destroyer, she's quite zippy, and you can get in there and get out of there with some degree of ease. Still have to be careful about the really fast ships, though. Turning circle radius, however, is a little bit on the big end at 640 meters. If you look at the Shiratsuyu and the Mahan, they're both in the sub 600 range, and compared to the Mas, it's the same. So Akatsuki with turning circle radius a little bit on the big side. Rudder shift time stock 3.2 seconds. If you throw on a rudder shift module, you can get that down a little bit more. And finally, let's talk about concealment. The Akatsuki, well, she does struggle in this department a little bit. Without concealment expert on the captain, with just the camo paint, her detectability range by sea is 7.2 kilometers. And this is what I think a lot of players who play Akatsuki at the beginning will struggle with, which is, wow, she's kind of easy to detect. And I've had questions from people about how would you actually play her without concealment expert. Now, I already said that for this particular ship, I'm going to assume you don't have it, just because at tier 7, if you're normally grinding up the lines, you're not going to have that captain with concealment expert. In this case, you really have to look at what the Akatsuki has going for her, which is her torpedoes. So what you're really going to be doing is that without the skill, you're going to be more just setting walls of torpedoes into areas where ships have to pass. Now, that means you're not really going to be playing that ninja assassin role, but you are going to play that zoning role. And that is what the Akatsuki is really good at. Just zone off, keep throwing walls of torpedoes, and if you're able to make accurate predictions of how the enemy ship is moving, you will eventually get those torpedo hits. So, that is the Akatsuki's playstyle if you don't have Concealment Expert. If you have Concealment Expert, then of course you can consider being a little bit more ninja, getting a little bit closer, and actually targeting individual ships for torpedo walls. So keep that in mind when you're playing the ship. In terms of modules, in terms of what you should get, I would say you can get main armaments mod 1 just to make sure your torpedoes and your guns don't get knocked out that frequently. On the second slot, I would recommend getting main battery modification 2. Now, yes, this slows down your rate of fire and does make your guns fire a little bit slower, but they do make that turret traverse just a little bit better. If you equip this module and take a look at the guns, notice that 180 degree turn time is now 26.1 seconds. It's a little bit better, and I do find it a little bit more tolerable when I'm maneuvering and trying to get guns back onto target. So I would recommend main battery mod 2. Then you can choose, and there's all sorts of things to choose from. You can go damage control if you want, you can go propulsion mod, you can go steering gears. This is just really your choice here. Now personally, I've just gone with propulsion modification just because even though I'm running last stand, I still want to minimize the chances of my engine getting knocked out, just to keep up my speed as much as possible. And finally, go steering gears modification 2, just to get that rudder down a little bit more. So your ship, with the larger turn radius, does have a reasonably fast 2.6 second rudder shift time. And finally, the commander. And with the commander, like I said, I'm running only a 10-point commander here. Now, the skills I've picked right now are basic firing training, last stand, superintendent, and demo expert. Alternative picks, if you want, you can probably go basic firing training, you can go last stand. You could consider things like torpedo acceleration if you want just those faster torpedoes, but there's a lot more risk if you don't have concealment expert. I only would recommend you consider torpedo acceleration if you can get concealment expert. And then of course you can always go for advanced firing training for additional range and a puny bit more AA defense. So these are all things you can consider. Anyways, that pretty much does it from the port view. Let's take this exact build and let's take her into battle and see how she performs. Alright, so into the battle we go, and we are on the Two Brothers map, and I'm actually a bottom tier destroyer here. Tier 7 destroyer in a tier 9 battle. Now, I'm initially going to head towards A, and the only reason I'm even heading there is one, like I said, the Akatsuki does have some speed going for her, so you can actually get yourself out of trouble. And Also on the enemy team, the only destroyer that's really going to be that dangerous to me is the Fletcher. So taking a little bit of a risk, going to come in here and see if I can cap, and at the same time I fire some torpedoes in that direction in case somebody decides to come around the corner. Alright, so taking a look, enemy battleship still a good distance away. Enemy cruiser went behind the island, a little bit out of my reach. That cruiser, also being aware that I'm on the cap, is turning away. So I think I should be able to get this cap all right. One thing I guess I didn't really talk about earlier, which is the Akatsuki. When you do not have the concealment expert skill, it is best that you play a defensive walling torpedo boat. So what that means is go to the flank where the enemy team is going to be pushing rather than the flank that your team is pushing. If you are on the flank that your team is pushing, you really have to close the distance quite a bit more and then get your torpedoes off so your torpedoes actually have enough range to catch the retreating enemy ships. When the enemy ships are coming towards your team, they could be, let's say, 11.5 kilometers away, approaching your direction, and you can fire your torpedoes, and the enemy ships will essentially run into them. Again, very important to predict where they might be going. Now, this doesn't guarantee that you're going to be getting hits all the time, but the Akatsuki does have a fast enough torpedo reload that you are going to be able to get those torpedoes off reasonably frequently. And as long as you predict and you keep trying to predict and you get those torpedoes off, eventually you're going to get those hits. So far, even though I haven't had any games that I would say are outright spectacular, where I'm getting 100,000+ damage in the Akatsuki, with a 10-point captain, I have been able to average 60,000+ damage with 1 or 2 battles, I think, where I was in the 90,000 damage range, which isn't all too shabby. I mean, once you're doing 60k damage using a ship like this, you're doing, again, like I said, without that 15-point captain, you're doing pretty darn well. So again, see the enemy ships with so many torpedoes going their way, including those from our Benson, we are keeping them at bay, and I get my first hit on the New Orleans right there. And that New Orleans is in trouble. Don't actually think I get the kill though, unfortunately. Alright, continuing to zone out the enemy battleships, make sure that they can't push effectively. Now you'll notice that a lot of times I'm not firing my torpedoes on the white line. Now yes, at times I still am, but a lot of times you'll see me sort of going away from that white predictor. Again, I'm less targeting individual ships and more just targeting an area and hoping that if they do turn into that area, they might run into those torpedoes. That wave that I fired, if you actually keep trying to pay attention to that wave, I almost, very close, tagged that Bismarck that's running away. Torpedoes just happen to run out right before the ship. Yeah, that happens. I mean, you are oftentimes firing torpedoes at things that are coming into that sort of edge. Remember, don't worry about targeting individual ships, target areas. The other thing about the Akatsuki is, remember, I did mention she has decent guns, which means that you should make use of them. Does that mean you should be always firing your guns like a gunboat is? No. What that means is you pick situations where the enemy team isn't targeting you. So in this case, I am not being targeted by the Colorado, by the cruisers, or anything like that. So I took the liberty to pop a few shots at the Colorado, managed to set one fire, which is a little bit of damage. Then, of course, the Fletcher pops up. And the Fletcher is a higher priority target. It's a destroyer, after all, and the highest tier destroyer on the enemy team. And I'm not afraid to engage with my guns. I mean, if I was in a close-in knife fight with a Fletcher, probably not winning that fight. I actually did take a couple of shots there that were quite potato, so forgive me for that. But, the Akatsuki's guns are good enough that you can get into slightly longer range fights with other destroyers. You also notice that I pulled a little bit further away, and the reason I'm pulling a little bit further away is because remember that very slow turret traverse? Don't just say, oh, I want to turn around, and then turn around right away, because your guns are going to take some time to get back around. So you'll see that I sort of went a little bit further away, came back in when it was safe, and of course had that time to get my guns around. When battleships light targets, which is what my Missouri did, popped radar onto that Fletcher, I engage again, right? So you have to be willing to engage. That's with your guns. That's one of the keys to success with Japanese destroyers. You're not firing your guns all the time, but in the right circumstances, you are engaging with them. Yes, your torpedoes are still your main weapons, but do not forget your guns. It is something that, unfortunately, a lot of Japanese DD captains do have a tendency of forgetting, right? Especially with Akatsuki. Guns are actually pretty good. As you can see, I am putting a hurt on that Fletcher. And even though I don't get the kill, the Missouri manages to finish him off with a salvo coming in right there. Missouri finishes off the kill. And by the way, Missouri, good job on that radar. And yeah, he actually gives me a high, and so here's a shout out for you in the video, by the way. So yeah, so we did good. We managed to terminate that Fletcher, and again, continue to defend this one cap. Team's actually doing a pretty good job pushing up the other side, so we're just going to continue to defend and delay to the best of our abilities. Of course, in this current situation, the enemy ships are able to get onto our cap and take it from us, but we're going to make them pay as much as possible. Missouri in a bit of trouble. I think he took a torpedo there, so unfortunately I couldn't save him. I tried to get over there, try to pop a smoke for him. Well, almost, it was pretty close. Unfortunately for me, by the time I get over here, if you take a look at the mini map, I get caught out a little bit. I dropped my smoke, and yikes, not in the best of positions. I was so close, like, oh, so close. Almost saved that Missouri. But now, of course, when I finally got over here, I realized, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. So pop smoke. Now remember, I did say that the Akatsuki's torpedo reloads pretty quickly. And it is because of that relatively fast reload that I actually get saved here. Do keep in mind, the Akatsuki and the Shiratsuyu, they have sort of different playstyles for their torpedoes. The Shiratsuyu is very good at making huge walls of torpedoes and scaring the life out of people. The Akatsuki, you oftentimes are surprising people with that torpedo reload. Just to get that faster, nice reload on your torpedoes, people sometimes just not expecting those to come their way. So the Bismarck probably saw the torpedoes that I fired earlier going by, probably didn't think I had torpedoes right now, but I do, and I have them. So of course, looking at where the Bismarck is, I'm thinking, okay, he's either going to have to turn in, potentially ramming into that battleship. Maybe that's something he won't do, or he turns away, rams into the island. Probably not a good idea either. So made a prediction that maybe he'll try to just go straight push hard and maybe get away using pure speed. So lead a little bit ahead of where the indicator was. Unfortunately, I didn't get the lock on there. And of course, yeah, Bismarck in deep trouble, eats a bunch of my torpedoes, and dies. Mission accomplished, took down the big ship. I'm getting out of there. I've lost all my support. And again, like I said, the Akatsuki does have speed. Something the Shiratsuyu doesn't. And the Shiratsuyu, you'd better be a little bit more careful not to get into these kinds of situations, because you might not be able to get away. The Akatsuki, at least you have good speed. And so I was able to pull some distance away from the two cruisers and get away pretty much scot-free. My team comes around, takes care of the remaining enemy ships north, and they get back onto the A-cap, and of course we win this battle. So this battle for me, I don't have the screenshots for it, unfortunately, but I do remember I was top of the team at the end in terms of experience, because managed to get some base resets, got some good damage in on the Fletcher, managed to kill the Bismarck, had a full base cap by myself, and so, did very well. Damage-wise, 62,000, again, not huge amounts of damage, but a respectable amount for a destroyer. And as long as you're able to maintain some pretty consistent damage like this, you should be able to do quite well. Anyways, folks, that pretty much wraps up everything for the Akatsuki. Do keep in mind, though, if you do get Concealment Expert, that's the one last thing I want to talk about. If you do get Concealment Expert, you can play a little bit more aggressively, and you might even be able to join those pushing flanks and actually go on the offensive. But if you are, using the 10-point captains and you don't have Concealment Expert, play defensive and try to hold back the enemy team with your torpedo walls. And two final things. First things first, I want to thank all of these individuals for being amazing Santas and sending me Santa crates during the holiday season. Thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. And every time I see my 13 Emden captains and 10 Ishizuchi captains, I will remember all of you. And one final thing, which is I would really, really like to thank my patrons. You guys are amazing. Your support allows me to continue doing what I do, and if it weren't for you guys, I would really not be able to do it. So thank you all so much for your support. And of course, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, to everybody else, I hope I've been able to explain how the Akatsuki works. Of course, if you've got questions, you can leave those in the comment section below. Otherwise, have a great day, folks, and I'm looking forward to talking to all of you again really, really soon.